Hey everyone! If you're an iOS developer, you've used push and modal transitions probably 1,000 times. But have you ever really stopped to think about what's happening under the hood? Specifically with your app's memory. Today, we're going to get into exactly that. How these two seemingly simple navigation patterns can have a huge impact on your app's performance.
So you might be thinking push versus modal. Isn't that just about the animation? Whether the screen slides in from the side or pops up from the bottom? Well, let me tell you, it is so much more than that. The answer is a huge no. This choice has some pretty significant and honestly often overlooked consequences for your app's memory footprint. Let's see what I mean.
All right, first up, let's talk about the classic, the navigation push. This is the absolute backbone of most apps where you have a clear hierarchy. And to really get how it behaves with memory, we're going to use a really simple but powerful mental model.
I want you to imagine your navigation flow is a stack of books, right? Every time you push to a new screen, you're just placing a new book right on top of that stack. Now here's the crucial part. You're not putting any of the old books away. They all stay right there, one on top of the other, holding their place. In this book metaphor, it translates directly to how memory works. When you call push view controller, that new screen gets added to the navigation stack. It doesn't replace anything, it just sits on top. And that means all the previous screens, the entire history you just navigated through, are kept alive, active, and sitting right there in memory. So your memory usage, it just grows and grows with every single push.
Now, this makes push absolutely perfect for those structured hierarchical flows, like a settings menu where a user needs to go back step by step. But, and this is a big but, if you have a really deep navigation stack, your app can get incredibly memory heavy. Why? Because none of those screens are released until the user physically taps that back button and pops them off the stack.
Okay, so that's push. Now let's switch gears and look at our second method, modal presentation. This works on a completely different principle, both in how it looks and, more importantly, how it handles memory. For modals, forget the books. I want you to think of a pop-up window on your computer. It appears on top of whatever you're doing to handle a very specific self-contained task. The main window, it's still there, just waiting underneath, but that pop-up is temporary, and when you're done with it, you close it, and it's just gone.
And this is where the real magic happens for your app's performance. When you present a screen modally, yeah, it appears on top of the other view controller. But as soon as you dismiss that modal, poof, it's typically deallocated from memory right then and there. The memory it was using is freed up instantly.
So think of it this way. A modal view is kind of like an island. It's not part of that larger navigation stack we talked about. Now, the screen that presented it, that one stays in memory, waiting for you to come back. But the modal itself is totally independent. Its whole life in memory is tied to that one action, dismiss.
Okay, so we've seen both models on their own. Now, for the fun part. Let's put them head-to-head in a direct memory showdown, just to make these differences crystal clear.
Let's just break this right down. First off, is it stack-based? For push, that's a big yes. For modal, nope, not at all. Okay, what about retaining screens? Push keeps all the previous screens in that stack. But modal, it only holds on to the single one that presented it. And this directly affects memory growth. With push, it's cumulative. It just keeps increasing. With modal, it's temporary. And maybe the most important line here, the release timing. For push, a screen is only released on a pop. For modal, it's gone immediately on dismiss.
So, we've seen the how and the why, and all of this brings us to the most important question, really. When should you use each one? Because it's all about choosing the right tool for the right job.
Here's your simple rule of thumb. Use push for those deep, structured flows, where the user's path is part of the context. Think drilling down into categories in a shopping app. But use modal for temporary, self-contained tasks that kind of interrupt the main flow. Things like composing an email, adjusting a setting, or popping up a login screen.
And that really just brings us right to the core takeaway here. This quote from the source material, it just says it all perfectly. Choosing the right transition isn't just about UX, it's also about efficient memory usage. It's a fundamental architectural decision, not just a pretty animation. It's about building an app that's responsive and doesn't hog memory.
So, I'll leave you with this thought. The next time you're designing a new flow in your app, just take a second to think about its memory implications. Ask yourself, am I building a permanent library where every book stays on the shelf? Or am I creating a series of temporary pop-ups that just disappear when they're no longer needed? Your app's performance really depends on that choice.